The fastest way to embarrass yourself is to assume you know who someone is after looking at them for 5 seconds. I learned that lesson on a rainy Thursday night in Manhattan. At the time, I thought I was the smartest person in the room. I was 27, running on 3 cups of coffee and pure determination, coordinating one of the largest charity galas of the year inside the Grand Lexington Hotel. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. A string quartet played softly near the ballroom entrance. Men in tailored suits discussed investments worth more than I would earn in a lifetime. Women drifted across polished marble floors in designer gowns that probably cost more than my car. Everything had to be perfect. The donors expected perfection. The board expected perfection. And if I wanted the promotion I had spent 2 years chasing, I needed perfection too. My headset crackled with another request as I checked my clipboard for what felt like the 100th time. The keynote speaker had arrived. The silent auction was ahead of schedule. The catering manager was panicking over a missing shipment of champagne. Normal gala problems. Then I noticed him. He stepped through the front entrance carrying a long garment bag over one shoulder. Dark jacket. Simple black shirt. No designer watch. No expensive shoes. No VIP badge hanging around his neck. He looked completely out of place among Manhattan's elite. For a second, I assumed he was part of the event staff. Then I saw him pause near the registration table and glance around the ballroom. He looked calm, almost amused. Meanwhile, I was drowning in stress. Something about that irritated me immediately. I walked over before one of the board members could notice him standing there. "Excuse me," I said. "Vendor entrance is around back." He turned toward me. Tall, broad shoulders, maybe mid-30s. His expression remained perfectly neutral. "Is that so?" he asked. His voice was low and steady. "Yes," I replied. "Guests enter through registration." His eyes drifted briefly toward the ballroom before returning to me. "And how do you know I'm not a guest?" I let out a short laugh. "It was a mistake." "Trust me," I said. "I know. Who's on the guest list?" For the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not offended. Not angry. Almost entertained. Interesting. Looking back, that should have warned me. Confident people usually argue when they're insulted. Truly powerful people rarely bother. But I didn't know that yet. I folded my arms and pointed toward the rear hallway. Delivery teams and drivers used the service entrance. A nearby volunteer overheard me and smirked. Another staff member chuckled under his breath. The stranger glanced at them, then back at me. "A driver," he repeated. "That's your final answer?" I nodded confidently. "Unless you're secretly here to donate $10 million. The volunteer laughed out loud. The stranger simply held my gaze for a second longer. Then he gave a small nod. "Good to know." Without another word, he stepped aside and walked toward a seating area near the ballroom entrance. Calm, unbothered, completely unaffected. I watched him go, feeling oddly victorious. I thought I had just put an arrogant outsider in his place. I had no idea that within the next hour, every person in that building would stand when he entered the room. For the next 30 minutes, I forgot about him. Or at least I thought I did. The gala consumed every ounce of my attention. Donors needed seating adjustments. Reporters wanted interviews. A board member complained that the floral arrangements were the wrong shade of ivory. The usual chaos that somehow accompanied every elegant event. Still, every now and then, I caught sight of the stranger. He remained near the edge of the ballroom, seated alone with a glass of sparkling water. Not wine, not champagne, just water. He seemed completely detached from the noise around him. While everyone else chased attention, he avoided it. While guests competed to be seen, he looked perfectly comfortable disappearing into the background. It should have made me curious. Instead, it annoyed me. Around 7:30, I passed by his table while checking place cards. He looked up briefly. "Busy night?" he asked. I stopped for half a second. "You could say that. You seem stressed." I laughed dryly. "That tends to happen when you are responsible for 400 guests and a multi-million-dollar fundraiser." Fair point. His calm expression never changed. Somehow that made me feel even more flustered. "Are you always this relaxed?" I asked. "Most of the time." "Must be nice." He smiled slightly. "It has its advantages." Before I could respond, my headset crackled again. Another problem. Another emergency. I hurried away without saying goodbye. 10 minutes later, I was standing near the stage reviewing the evening schedule when one of the junior coordinators rushed toward me. Her eyes were wide. "Chloe, have you seen the updated donor list?" "Not yet." "What?" She lowered her voice. Apparently, a major contributor arrived early. I glanced at the clipboard. Who? I do not know. The executive team is acting strange. Strange was not unusual during fundraising season. Wealthy people tended to make everyone nervous. I brushed it off and returned to work. Then something unexpected happened. Several members of the board suddenly left their tables at the same time. The hotel manager appeared near the entrance. Two security supervisors repositioned themselves around the ballroom. Even the event chairman looked distracted. The atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Like the air changing before a storm. Conversations softened. Heads turned toward the lobby. People checked their phones. Whispers spread from table to table. I followed their gaze and saw movement beyond the glass doors. A line of black vehicles had pulled up outside beneath the glow of the hotel lights. One after another. Sleek. Expensive. Impossibly polished despite the rain. Men in dark suits stepped out first. Professional. Disciplined. Focused. They moved with quiet efficiency that instantly commanded attention without demanding it. My stomach tightened for reasons I could not explain. Around me, guests began standing. Not all at once. One table at a time. Then another. Then another. The board members who never stood for anyone were suddenly adjusting their jackets and straightening their posture. The hotel manager looked like he was about to welcome royalty. Confused, I turned toward the seating area near the entrance. The chair was empty. The stranger was gone. And for the first time all evening, I felt a small, uncomfortable knot of uncertainty form in my chest. There is a specific kind of silence that only happens when everyone in a room is waiting for the same person. I had never noticed it before that night. The ballroom had been buzzing with conversation seconds earlier. Glasses clinked. Laughter drifted across the tables. The quartet played softly near the stage. Then all of it faded into something quieter. Not silence exactly. Anticipation. The hotel's main doors opened. Rain shimmered behind the glass like silver threads beneath the city lights. Every eye turned toward the entrance. Mine included. A group of men in dark tailored suits entered first. They moved with calm confidence, not rushing, not scanning the room dramatically, simply creating space as they walked. People stepped aside automatically. Not because they were told to, because they wanted to. I watched the board chairman straighten his tie. The same man who once made a senator wait 20 minutes for a meeting. Nearby donors rose from their seats. Conversation stopped entirely. Then I saw him. My stomach dropped so suddenly it felt like missing a step on a staircase. The stranger walked through the entrance. The same black shirt. The same calm expression. The same man I had practically ordered to use the service entrance less than an hour earlier. Except now he looked completely different. Or maybe he did not. Maybe I was the one seeing clearly for the first time. He moved through the ballroom at an unhurried pace. No dramatic entrance. No attempt to draw attention. Yet attention followed him anyway. Executives crossed the room to greet him. Investors nodded respectfully. The chairman himself walked forward with both hands extended. "Mr. Moretti," he said with a smile I had never seen him give anyone. "We are honored you could join us." Moretti. The name hit me immediately. I had heard it before. Everyone in New York had. Not from headlines. Not from interviews. From whispers. Business magazines. Charity foundations. Real estate projects. Private investments. The kind of influence that existed quietly but seemed connected to everything important. Adrian Moretti. My mouth went dry. Around me, staff members exchanged nervous looks. One of the volunteers who had laughed earlier stared at the floor. Another looked like she wanted to disappear completely. Meanwhile, Adrian shook hands, exchanged greetings, and thanked people for their welcome as though this were the most ordinary evening in the world. Then the event chairman stepped onto the stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight would not have been possible without the generosity of one individual whose contributions continue to transform communities across this city." The room erupted into applause. My heart pounded louder with every word. Please join me in welcoming our lead benefactor and keynote guest, Mr. Adrian Moretti. More applause. Louder this time. People stood again. Some even cheered. And there I stood frozen near the stage, remembering every sarcastic word I had thrown at him. Every assumption. Every smirk. Every moment I thought I knew exactly who he was. Adrian accepted the applause politely. Then, as if sensing my stare across the crowded ballroom, he turned his head. His eyes found mine instantly. For one terrifying second, The entire room disappeared. He held my gaze. Calm. Unreadable. Then the faintest hint of amusement touched the corner of his mouth. The exact same expression he had worn when I called him a driver. That was the moment I realized something far worse than being wrong. He remembered everything. I spent the next 20 minutes operating entirely on instinct. Smile at donors. Check schedules. Answer questions. Pretend my world had not just collapsed beneath a pair of calm green eyes. The problem was that once you realize someone is important, every previous interaction replays in your head with horrifying clarity. I remembered pointing toward the service entrance. I remembered the volunteer laughing. I remembered asking whether he was secretly donating $10 million. The memory alone made me want to disappear into the ballroom carpet. Across the room, Adrian Moretti continued greeting guests as though nothing unusual had happened. Investors approached him. Foundation directors approached him. City officials approached him. Every conversation seemed to end with the same expression on their faces. Respect. Genuine respect. Not fear. Not obligation. Respect. That confused me more than anything. The stories people whispered about powerful men usually sounded larger than life. Yet the man standing near the stage looked completely comfortable listening instead of speaking. A few minutes later, the chairman invited Adrian onto the platform to address the guests. The applause was immediate. Hundreds of people. One standing ovation. I watched from the side curtain, clutching my clipboard so tightly my fingers hurt. Adrian stepped to the microphone. The room fell silent. Thank you for being here tonight, he began. His voice carried easily through the ballroom. Calm. Controlled. No dramatic performance. No oversized ego. This event is not about recognition. It is about opportunity. Every scholarship funded tonight gives someone a chance they might not otherwise have. He spoke for less than 5 minutes. Yet by the end, people seemed even more captivated than before. Not because he was charismatic. Because he sounded sincere. That was somehow more powerful. When the speech ended, the ballroom erupted into applause again. I looked down at my clipboard and immediately regretted it. A shadow stopped beside me. My heart nearly stopped with it. Busy night? Adrian asked. The exact same question he had asked earlier. I looked up slowly. He stood only a few feet away. Somehow the crowded ballroom suddenly felt very small. Mr. Moretti, I managed. Please, he said. Adrian is fine. My face burned. I owe you an apology. The words came out faster than I intended. Actually, several apologies. For a moment, he simply studied me. Not judging. Not mocking. Just observing. For what? He asked. I blinked. You know exactly for what. A faint smile appeared. The service entrance? I groaned internally. Yes. The driver comment? My embarrassment doubled. Also yes. He nodded thoughtfully. Those were memorable. I wished the floor would open beneath me. Instead, Adrian surprised me. He laughed softly. Not cruelly. Not triumphantly. Genuinely. Chloe, if it helps, you are not the first person to misjudge me. I stared at him. You are taking this much better than I deserve. Maybe. His expression softened slightly. Or maybe I learned a long time ago that first impressions say more about circumstances than character. Before I could respond, one of the board members hurried over and asked for Adrian's attention. He excused himself politely and turned away. Then he paused. By the way, he said without looking back, for the record, I would have made a terrible driver. And just like that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with a realization I had not expected. The man I had spent an hour fearing was showing me more grace than I had shown him all evening. The strange thing about embarrassment is that it does not disappear when someone forgives you. Sometimes it gets worse. The gala continued around me in a blur of music, conversations, and polite laughter, but my mind kept replaying every second of my interaction with Adrian. The more I learned about him throughout the evening, the worse I felt. People spoke about scholarships he funded, community centers he supported, medical programs he had helped expand. Every new story felt like another reminder of how wrong I had been. By 9 o'clock, the fundraising totals had shattered expectations. The board members were thrilled. Donors were celebrating. Reporters moved through the ballroom collecting interviews. Yet I could not shake the growing knot in my stomach. Part of it was guilt. Another part was something harder to explain. Fear. Not fear of Adrian himself. Fear of consequences I could not predict. Powerful people lived in a different world. One careless mistake around the wrong person could follow you for years. I knew that much. As I checked final auction numbers near the registration desk, two senior board members walked past me. They lowered their voices, but not enough. "Did you hear what happened earlier?" one asked. "About the coordinator?" The other sighed. Apparently, she mistook Mr. Moretti for hotel staff. My heart sank instantly. Wonderful. The story was spreading. "That could have gone badly," the first man replied. "Very badly." They continued walking before noticing me standing there. I stared at the floor for several seconds afterward. Very badly. Those words echoed inside my head. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe not. For the rest of the evening, every glance from a board member felt loaded with meaning. Every whispered conversation felt connected to me. Rationally, I knew that was unlikely. Emotionally, I was convinced disaster was waiting just around the corner. Around 10 o'clock, my supervisor, Diane, approached with an unreadable expression. "Chloe, can we talk?" My pulse immediately doubled. This was it. I followed her toward a quieter hallway outside the ballroom. The sound of the event faded behind us. Diane folded her arms. "I received 3 different calls tonight." I swallowed hard. "Okay." One from the chairman. Not good. One from a board member. Worse. And one from a donor. My stomach dropped completely. Diane looked at me for a long moment. Then she surprised me. "Do you know what they all said?" I shook my head. "They all praised your work." I blinked. "What?" "The event is running smoothly. The guests are happy. The fundraising numbers are incredible." Relief flooded through me so quickly I nearly laughed. Then Diane added something else. "There is one more thing." My heart immediately climbed back into my throat. "Mr. Moretti specifically mentioned your professionalism." I stared at her. Surely I had heard that wrong. "He did what?" "He complimented your handling of the event." Diane smiled faintly. Apparently, he was impressed. For several seconds I could not speak. Of all the outcomes I had imagined, that one had never crossed my mind. Not even once. As Diane walked away, I remained standing alone in the hallway. Confused, relieved, humbled, and for the first time that night, genuinely curious. Because nothing about Adrian Moretti matched the version of him I had built inside my head. And somehow, that realization felt far more dangerous than any rumor ever could. The gala finally ended a little after 11:30. Guests filtered toward the exits carrying auction, catalogs, and gift bags. The quartet packed away their instruments. Hotel staff began clearing tables that had sparkled beneath chandeliers only hours earlier. Normally, the end of an event brought relief. That night, it brought questions. I stood alone near the ballroom entrance reviewing final reports when I noticed Adrian across the room speaking with several foundation executives. Even after 6 hours, people still gravitated toward him. Not because he demanded attention, because he listened. Every conversation seemed to matter. Every person seemed important. It was the exact opposite of what I expected from someone with his reputation. As the crowd thinned, I found myself watching him more than I should have. Not because of his influence, because I was trying to solve a puzzle. The man I met at the entrance and the man everyone described felt like 2 completely different people. Yet somehow they were the same. "You are staring again." The voice startled me. I turned to find Diane standing beside me holding a folder. I was not staring. She raised an eyebrow. "You absolutely were." I laughed despite myself. "I am just confused." "About him?" she asked. I nodded. Diane glanced toward Adrian before lowering her voice. "Most people are." Before I could ask what she meant, another coordinator called her away. A few minutes later, I gathered my things and headed toward the lobby. My feet hurt. My shoulders hurt. Every muscle in my body reminded me that I had been working since sunrise. Outside, rain still tapped softly against the hotel windows. New York shimmered beneath reflections of red taillights and street lamps. I stepped through the revolving doors and immediately realized I had a problem. My rideshare app showed surge pricing that looked completely ridiculous. Every available driver was at least 40 minutes away. I groaned quietly and pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders. Long night. I turned. Adrian stood a few feet away beneath the hotel awning. Somehow he had appeared without me noticing. "You could say that," I replied. He glanced toward my phone. "Transportation issue." Apparently everyone in Manhattan decided to request a ride at the exact same moment. A faint smile crossed his face. "That sounds about right." For a second, neither of us spoke. Rain drummed softly against the sidewalk. Traffic rolled past in glowing streaks of light. The city felt calmer than it had all evening. Can I ask you something? I said before I could stop myself. Adrian nodded. Earlier tonight. Why did you help me? His expression remained neutral. Help you how? You could have let everyone think I was incompetent. Was that what you were? No. Then there is your answer. I stared at him. It sounded so simple when he said it. Adrian slipped his hands into his coat pockets and looked toward the street. People make mistakes, Chloe. Some mistakes are worse than others. True. He glanced at me again. But I learned something useful a long time ago. What? The way someone treats you after a mistake tells you far more about them than the mistake itself. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then a black sedan pulled smoothly to the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Adrian looked toward the car before turning back to me. Good night, Chloe. Good night, Adrian. He nodded once and stepped inside. The sedan disappeared into the rain seconds later. I watched the taillights vanish into Manhattan traffic and felt something unexpected settle in my chest. Respect. Genuine respect. The kind that arrives quietly when assumptions fall apart. And as I finally opened my rideshare app again, I realized the most surprising part of the evening was not discovering who Adrian Moretti was. It was discovering how badly I wanted to know who he really was. The next week should have been ordinary. Instead, Adrian Moretti seemed to appear everywhere. Not physically, not in some dramatic movie-like way. His name simply kept surfacing in conversations I had never paid attention to before. A scholarship announcement on the morning news. A community housing project featured in a business article. A children's education program that had just received a major donation. Every time I encountered his name, the same thought returned. None of those stories matched the assumptions I had made that night. One Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in a crowded coffee shop reviewing proposals for an upcoming fundraiser when Diane dropped into the chair across from me. She looked entirely too pleased with herself. You are doing it again, she said. I looked up from my laptop. Doing what? Thinking about him. I nearly spilled my coffee. I am not. Chloe. She laughed. You have mentioned Adrian Moretti 3 times in the last 10 minutes. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Unfortunately, she was right. That realization bothered me more than it should have. Later that evening, after finishing work, I walked through Midtown beneath a sky painted with streaks of orange and purple. The city felt alive in the way only New York could. Taxi horns echoed between buildings. Steam rose from street grates. People hurried past carrying shopping bags and takeout containers. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone had a story. I found myself remembering something Adrian had said beneath the hotel awning. The way someone treats you after a mistake tells you far more about them than the mistake itself. The sentence had stayed with me all week. Because he had every opportunity to embarrass me. Instead, he chose kindness. That choice felt strangely rare. My phone buzzed. A new email. I almost ignored it until I noticed the sender. Moretti Foundation. I stopped walking. My pulse quickened immediately. The message was brief. Professional. Unexpected. The foundation was hosting a planning session for an upcoming charity initiative and wanted recommendations from event coordinators who had worked on successful fundraisers. My name had been submitted. At the bottom was an invitation to attend a private meeting the following Friday. I read the email twice, then 3 times. It was probably nothing personal. A professional opportunity. A routine invitation. Yet I could not shake the feeling that somehow Adrian was involved. Friday arrived faster than expected. The foundation headquarters occupied the upper floors of a modern glass tower overlooking the Hudson River. Everything inside felt understated and elegant. No flashy displays. No unnecessary luxury. Just quiet confidence. A receptionist guided me toward a conference room. As I approached the door, I heard voices inside. One of them instantly caught my attention. Calm. Steady. Familiar. My stomach performed an impressive acrobatic routine. I paused outside for a second and took a slow breath. Then I opened the door. Adrian stood near the windows overlooking the river. Sunlight reflected off the glass behind him. He turned at the sound of the door opening. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then that familiar hint of amusement appeared in his eyes. Chloe, he said, this time you found the right entrance. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours, but it felt much shorter. Partly because the project itself was exciting. Partly because every time I thought I had Adrian figured out, he said something that forced me to start over. The foundation was launching a citywide scholarship initiative for students from underserved neighborhoods. The room was filled with executives, educators, and nonprofit leaders, yet Adrian spent most of the meeting listening instead of speaking. When he did speak, people paid attention, not because they had to, because his questions were thoughtful, practical, human. By the time the session ended, Manhattan was wrapped in a blanket of cold rain. The glass walls of the conference room reflected streaks of gray clouds drifting across the Hudson. Most attendees left quickly. I stayed behind gathering notes and organizing documents. Eventually, I found myself alone in the lobby. I pulled out my phone and frowned. No signal. The storm must have been interfering with the network. Great. I stepped outside anyway, hoping to request a ride from the curb. The moment the revolving door opened, a gust of wind nearly tore my umbrella from my hand. Rain slashed sideways across the sidewalk. Traffic crawled through the storm. Every available rideshare within 5 miles had disappeared. I stood beneath the building awning trying to decide whether to wait or attempt the subway when a loud crack echoed somewhere down the block. Several pedestrians glanced upward. A construction barrier near a neighboring building had partially come loose in the wind. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to send a section of metal fencing scraping across the wet pavement and scatter people in different directions. The sudden commotion transformed the sidewalk into confusion. Umbrellas collided. People rushed for cover. Someone dropped a briefcase. Someone else nearly slipped on the slick concrete. I took a step backward and bumped into another pedestrian. My folder slipped from my hands. Papers exploded into the rain. No, no, no. I lunged after them immediately. Sheets scattered across the sidewalk like white birds. One page slid directly toward the street. Another vanished beneath a parked car. Within seconds, weeks of planning seemed determined to wash into New York Harbor. Then someone knelt beside me. A familiar hand caught one page before the wind could carry it away. Another page. Then another. You always create memorable entrances and exits, Adrian said calmly. Despite the situation, I laughed. Actually laughed. Rain soaked both of us as we gathered the remaining documents. Within a minute, everything was recovered. Not a single page missing. Adrian stood and handed me the folder. Thank you, I said. Again. You seem to be making a habit of that phrase. I shook my head. You seem to be making a habit of rescuing me from embarrassing situations. His expression softened. I do not think you need rescuing, Chloe. The city lights reflected in puddles around us. Traffic rolled past in shimmering streaks of red and gold. For a moment, the storm seemed farther away, quieter. Then why help? I asked. Adrian looked toward the river before answering. Because everyone deserves someone willing to stop when everyone else keeps walking. The simplicity of the answer caught me off guard. Before I could respond, a black sedan pulled smoothly to the curb. Adrian opened the rear door, then paused. Your ride situation is still hopeless, isn't it? I looked at my phone and sighed. Completely hopeless. The faintest smile appeared. Then let me solve at least one problem tonight. For a second, I looked at the open car door and hesitated. Not because I was afraid. Because a few weeks earlier, I would have refused out of pride alone. Adrian seemed to recognize the conflict on my face. It is only a ride home, Chloe, he said. Not a lifetime commitment. I laughed despite myself. You always know exactly what to say, do you not? Not even close. The driver waited patiently as rain continued drumming against the pavement. Finally, I nodded. Okay, thank you. The ride through Manhattan felt strangely peaceful. City lights reflected across rain-streaked windows, while traffic flowed slowly beneath the storm. For most of the trip, we simply talked. Not about business. Not about foundations or fundraising. Real conversations. Family. Work. Dreams we had almost given up on. The more Adrian spoke, the more I realized how little I actually knew about people when I relied on appearances. He was thoughtful, funny, surprisingly humble. Nothing like the image I had created in my head that first night. When the car finally stopped outside my apartment building, neither of us moved immediately. The rain had softened into a gentle mist. Streetlights painted the sidewalk gold. I looked at him and smiled. Can I tell you something honestly? Always. I took a breath. The night we met, I thought I understood exactly who you were. Adrian's expression remained calm. And now, I laughed softly. Now I realize I knew absolutely nothing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I continued. I judged you before I knew you. I assumed things that were unfair. I was arrogant. And I am sorry. The words felt overdue. Adrian looked out the window for a second before turning back toward me. You know what is interesting? He asked. What? Most people apologize because they are embarrassed. You are apologizing because you learned something. I blinked. Is that better? Much. A warm silence settled between us. Not awkward. Comfortable. The kind that only appears when two people stop trying to impress each other. Eventually, I reached for the door handle. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Chloe. I stepped onto the sidewalk and watched the sedan pull away into the city. For a long time, I stood there beneath the glow of the streetlights, thinking, smiling, remembering. Weeks earlier, I had looked at a stranger and decided his entire story based on a shirt, a garment bag, and my own assumptions. I thought status defined character. I thought appearances revealed truth. I was wrong. The funny thing is that Adrian never punished me for being wrong. He never embarrassed me, never held my mistake against me. Instead, he gave me something far more valuable: perspective. Because sometimes the most important people do not announce themselves. Sometimes the strongest people choose kindness when pride would be easier. And sometimes the greatest lesson arrives disguised as an ordinary stranger standing quietly in the corner of a crowded room. The night I thought I had figured Adrian Moretti out was the night I learned how little I understood about people. The day I stopped judging him was the day I finally started seeing him. And looking back now, that changed far more than either of us could have imagined.